Criss by Lynn Ray Perkins. Chapter 31. California of the Mind. Walking around Selden with a letter in your pocket is different than walking around Selden with no letter. Debbie stopped to look at the pile of dirt with pipes coming out of it. She didn't know what it was there for, but it looked like at any moment the pipes could organize themselves into the legs of a giant mechanical tarantula and rise up from the dirt. The old nun at Our Lady of Victory was watering the roses that grew outside the convent with a hose, or rather she was standing near the roses, playing with the hose. She squeezed the trigger rhythmically, releasing temporary nebulas of droplets that rose together, catching the sunlight in 100 synchronized sparkles, then fell together and landed on nothing in particular. She seemed to be having a good time. A little further on, Debbie leaned on an overgrown chain-link fence. A flash of red had caught her eye, and she wanted to see what it was. It was an immense woodpecker, bigger than her forearm, that had flown into a dappled grove of honey locusts. After a minute, he flew off. Debbie saw that a tiny creek flowed through the grove and, on an impulse, fished a dime from her pocket, tossed it in, and made a wish. The splish-splash started a small furry animal she hadn't noticed, and it scurried into the shadows. Selden felt like someone had plugged it in, like someone you've always known who has suddenly revealed hidden depths. Not deep, dark depths, just depths, texture. But when she returned home, she felt ordinary again, maybe even less than ordinary. She felt for the letter in her back pocket. It was there, but it might as well have been a grocery list. It wasn't working anymore. Maybe she'd used it up. All evening she felt ordinary. She sat on the couch in the basement feeling ordinary. She went upstairs to take a shower, and when she'd undressed, she looked in the mirror. Ordinary. Ordinary, less than ordinary. She had taken her glasses off, so she was squinting a little. It made her look mildly fierce. Her hair, usually pulled back, fell to her shoulders in an unbrushed mass, curling and frizzing in the humid air. She frowned at her squinting, frizzing, ordinary reflection. Why did she think something good could happen to her? But then something did. Something good and mysterious. It's hard to explain why. But she started to laugh. She laughed at her fierce, naked self frowning into the mirror. And she liked the girl who was laughing. It was a small piece of her Buddha self, snapping into place. End of Chapter 31. Chapter 32. Dan Persick's Progress. It wasn't the first time Dan Persick had seen the man with the missing legs, but it was the first time he'd spoken to him. Dan was sitting on a bench waiting for a bus when the guy came vaulting along the sidewalk. Dan, being an athlete, observed his technique and his equipment, the leather encasement held on by industrial-strength suspenders and the gloves. His own practiced muscles imagined performing in this same event. The man without legs arrived at Dan's bench, placed his hands on it, lifted himself up, and turned himself around so that he was facing the right way. He obviously had tremendous upper body strength. Dan admired this, and he respected the guts it took to haul yourself all over town this way. They greeted each other. Then Dan said, "So, what happened to your legs?" He asked with genuine interest. The man, who introduced himself and shook Dan's hand, found that refreshing. It was a pleasant change from the more frequent reactions of pretending not to notice that he didn't have legs, or ignoring him completely. He didn't blame anyone, but this felt better. He told Dan briefly how he had been separated from his legs. It was a war story. "That sucks," said Dan. What he said was exactly true and heartfelt. He asked the guy a few questions about how fast he could go, how much ground he covered in a day, how high a surface he could lift himself up to. Then their conversation shifted to other topics. Sports. The heat wave. Dan's bus came. He said, "See you around," and got on. He had been a decent human being, without even trying, or thinking about it. He could do that. Now, with an equal lack of effort, he handed the driver a transfer he'd found on the sidewalk and took the last available seat. Casting his gaze outside the window, he pretended not to notice the woman with a toddler on her hip, who'd gotten on behind him. First come, first served, he thought. The scales tipped back and forth. It was so hard to tell what he might come back as in another life, or even who he would turn out to be in this one. End of chapter 32. Chapter 33, A Pig Roast. When Phil mentioned that there was going to be a block party on their street, Hector said, "Hey, maybe I should bring up my guitar and play a few songs." Phil looked over at his friend and said, "Are you serious?" "I need to practice playing in front of people," said Hector. "Do you think it'd be okay?" Phil shrugged. "I guess so," he said. "I don't think anybody would care. But are you thinking that people will be, paying attention or singing along? Because if it's more than one or two songs, I wouldn't count on it." "That's okay," said Hector. "I can be background music. Or if it really seems stupid, I can always just stop or not do it. What else is going to happen?" "Nothing," said Phil. "It's just a party, like a picnic, in the middle of the street. They're going to put roadblocks at both ends. We'll drag out everybody's picnic tables and put them all together. The big event of the evening is that Lenny and his dad are going to roast a pig." "They're going to roast a pig?" echoed Hector. "A whole pig," said Phil. "They made their own pig roaster." "A pig roast," said Hector. "So it's going to be kind of like a luau." "Huh," said Phil, a sound that was not quite a laugh. It was about 1/6 of a laugh. "Only in that one small way," he said. "In every other way, it won't be anything like a luau." "I wonder if I have time to learn Tiny Bubbles," mused Hector. It was the only Hawaiian song he knew, although the only Hawaiian thing about it was that it was sung by a singer named Don Ho, who was from Hawaii. "I wouldn't go to any trouble," said Phil. He could almost see Hector's brain working. "It's a great song," said Hector. "I'd want to learn it anyway." End of chapter 33. Chapter 34, Roasting the Pig. Leon and Lenny had made the pig roaster themselves out of an old fuel tank they found in their basement. In a way, that's how the block party got started, because once you make a pig roaster, you want to try it out, and it takes a lot of people to eat a pig, and a lot of hours to roast one. They got out of bed at 3 in the morning and bumped softly down the dim, blurry hallway into the kitchen. Lenny flicked on the light over the sink, and they both stood there, frowning and squinting. Leon plugged the cord of the waiting percolator into its waiting wall socket. The red light went right on, and the gurgling started up. It sounded so awake. Outside in the cool quiet of the night, they started the truck and drove the roaster to a spot on the other side of the street that was close to where the party would be, near the streetlight, and where there would be shade most of the day. Leon emptied the bags of charcoal into the bottom of the tank and fussed around getting it to burn, while Lenny lifted down a sawhorse with reflections nailed onto it and a couple of lawn chairs. They were both trying to be quiet. Every bump and scrape seemed to tear holes in the silence. Far off, down by the river, a train blew its whistle and rumbled through town. Another person awake. "Go see if that coffee's ready and put it in the thermos," said Leon, the first words that had been spoken aloud. "Okay," said Lenny. He was feeling somewhat alert now. In the kitchen, he poured the coffee into the thermos. He screwed on the lid that was like a plug, then the one that was a cup, and then he thought maybe he would have a cup too. He took a mug from the cupboard and poured some half and half into it. He considered the bowl of sugar cubes and put 5 cubes in his pocket. After they got the pig into the roaster, Leon said that Lenny should go back to bed. But Lenny said he wasn't tired, so they just sat there in the lawn chairs on the asphalt, just out of the reach of the streetlight. A pleasant warmth radiated from the roaster. They sipped their coffee. Lenny had tasted coffee before, without getting what the big attraction was. He didn't really get it now, either. The warmth of it was nice, though, in the chilly hours before dawn. It felt nice in his hands. The taste was almost tolerable, with the half and half. He had dropped in one sugar cube, but he hadn't brought anything along to stir it with, so it was dissolving at the bottom of the cup, waiting down there in a soft, tasty lump. Leon smiled to himself as Lenny's head started to bob. Who but a kid could fall asleep sitting up in a lawn chair drinking coffee? He gently removed the cup from Lenny's hands and set it on the street, then reached into the truck, pulled out a jacket, and draped it carefully around Lenny's shoulders. Lenny's eyelids fluttered, then closed again. Leon sat back down and poured himself a little more coffee. He was used to being awake in the middle of the night. He liked it. A cricket was chirping slowly. There was a way of telling the temperature by how far the chirps were. Faster chirping meant warmer air, which everyone knew, but it was more precise than that. You could multiply it by some temperature, he thought, and get the temperature. And locusts, which made a lot of noise too, but in the daytime had a 7-year cycle, so you would know 7 years had gone by just in case you weren't keeping track. Or was it 17 years? He closed his eyes while he tried to remember which it was. It felt good to have his eyes closed, and he forgot to think about it. Whatever it was, he had been thinking about. End of chapter 34.